Thank you. Michael Mishie, gamer, AI enthusiast, CTO at Solve Kenya. I think my introduction with AI started when I started playing video games. I needed to understand how these non-playable characters were interacting with me. And through my progression and pursuit of video games, I then started self-teaching myself AI and writing a bunch of code. I've worked on a few models for computer vision for driverless cars, but for African roads, I've tried to tinker with the idea of trying to build something for voice, for it to mimic my voice, try to present that. That backfired. So mostly self-taught on AI. Yeah.
Hi, everyone. My name is John Kamara. I'm the founder for Ardanian Labs. My journey to AI, I'm a former medical student who fell in love with computers and software a long time ago in the US, and always curious about new technologies. So moved from med school, dropped out actually, and then decided to learn about this thing called codes, and sort of got involved in over 20 years from one form of technology, as long as it's new and it's interesting, curiosity more than anything else. So I'm a self-taught developer. I taught myself everything I know. And then just working for some of the biggest startups in the world who in the early days were always thinking about the future. What will the future do? What will the future do? So got really lucky to started working for Google in 2000 in Europe, so kind of got some understanding of what they were thinking about as people in the smart tech space. And started learning a lot about machine learning from like 2011, and then got really curious about deep learning. You can build neural pathways and neural networks that can connect data, and then got more interested in data, and obviously got interested in the more business side of it. So that's my journey to AI.
Okay. Morning, everyone. My name is Alfred Ongere. I'm the founder of Artificial Intelligence Kenya, AI Kenya. Other than that, I'm also a technology and product consultant. My journey into AI started around 2016, 2017. While in university, I was part of a group that was selected by Intel to train other students on fourth industrial revolution technologies. We started with Internet of Things in 2016. So we were going around universities in Kenya, training students on how to get started on these technologies. And then in early 2017, we were moved to AI. So that was my introduction into the field. A lot of interesting discoveries at that early stage. And then I had an entrepreneurship program in Boston that was taking us through different startups that were working around IoT, robotics, and AI. That really exposed me, and that sort of ignited a spark in me. And I wanted to bring the rich ecosystem in the States here in Kenya, and that's how I started AI Kenya in 2017. And we've been just generally building the ecosystem through learning, engaging, and connecting people to opportunities in AI. So I'd say I'm a hybrid of being self-taught and also being trained by industry vendors in this technology. So glad to be here.
Hi, morning.
Morning.
My name is Francis Kamuyu. I'm from MultiChoice Kenya. And my journey started with, mine is a bit different actually, because mine came from a problem. So we have all this data for most of you in this room as MultiChoice, DSTV or GoTV customers. And there are those who churn, there are those who remain. And we were doing analytics on that. And then it's quite a bit of data. Then I started looking at what other dimensions are there. So for example, from the census data, we have a dimension. There's some interesting dimensions there. And then there's a product that we worked with Safaricom to introduce, which now introduces the dimension of location. And it was a lot. It's a lot of data. So I got to the end of what SQL could do. And then I started thinking, now, what else? How else can I get insights, derive insights from this? And then, of course, now came machine learning. And then from machine learning, you go to deep neural networks. So it's been a progression like that. But for me, it basically came from the data side. Yes, all of it self-taught. I think the internet is still the best equalizer that we've had. If you don't know something, we can confidently say it's your fault. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah. I don't know if that's sufficient.
Yes, it is. It is. I like the insights. So I'll start with you, John Kamara. So the health industry is accused of having, well, too much data. And you handle a record which sort of came to life during COVID. You handle a lot of information, you handle a lot of data, and you are in AI. So how is it that you manage to color within the ethical lines on a daily basis with all this information that you have access to?
I guess interesting question. I think the first thing is really where I'm going in the future is where I start from. So I don't necessarily think about the now first when I try to do anything. My idea is also a futuristic world where I can understand the future of what that data means to me, how that data means to everybody that I am connected with. And off the back of that, begin then to work my way back into the present today. So what am I going to do to create a self-governing ecosystem for myself? So I can create a self-audit check, because when there are ethics, it's first it has to start from you. What is your own self-governing protocols and what is your own self-governing ethics within the framework of the data? And also, what are you doing from a bias network perspective, because it's internal. So, and because also we're in healthcare, it's very sensitive. It's an extremely, extremely sensitive space when it comes to the type of data and understanding the power of the microgranular data within the data that you can't see in plain sight. That's really where you first then have to begin to really, it's not really just about someone selling someone's data or saying, I'm gonna give you, it's really the power of what you can do with that information and depend on how you collect that information. So I'll give you an example. We base the business on metadata in healthcare. And metadata basically means every disease is made up of symptoms. People worry about diseases, but I don't worry about the disease, I worry about the symptom. Once you can understand the symptom, the pattern of the symptom, then you can understand, okay, well, this symptom, can I correlate climate data and can I correlate biodiversity data to this symptom? And if I can do that, can I correlate geolocation data to that symptom? Then I can begin to understand change in pattern and I can predict potential outbreaks that might happen before they do. And I can also predict change in patterns of how diseases work with people and why specific communities are changing their immune system and their DNAs. So in all that information, then you really have to self-govern yourself to say, look, I have to first be ethical by myself in terms of what I can do, what I learn with the data. So that is really what has been our biggest, our biggest leading point is about how we protect ourselves from the use of that data to our customers so they understand that we are also self-governed. So if you come and audit us, it's like when Bright was talking, why we built on the blockchain, is because so we can just self-govern. So if anybody comes to audit us, you can see the audit trail. So you can see that if any of my team has tampered with any form of data, it can't be changed, it's immutable, it's there. Somebody just tampered with it. I mean, we're going through an audit trail with international organizations, like go into my network, have a look at it. So again, it's not even about the AI for us, it's really your own ethical framework. And most organizations don't really have any ethical framework. And you have to create an ethical framework that allows you to first understand everything that you need to do to self-govern yourself against the people who work for you. And not that they're bad people or anything, but they also are, by design, potentially corrupt. So it's just a natural form of nature. So how do you do this? So that's what we do. We basically self-govern, create self-ethical frameworks, and then we now layer technology on top of that. And one of it is the blockchain. So we basically build all our data structures on the blockchain right now. And that way we can open our code base or our infrastructure and say, have a look, go and do an audit engineering, and we'll stick back.
Wow, that's an interesting perspective. I wouldn't have thought that AI and ethics is as good as the individual. So what you bring to the AI table is basically what your ethics is. Is that really the case? And in fact, you and Francis Kamoyo had a bit of a debate over this during the X100. You should have been there. So is it really possible for AI to be ethical? Or is it up to the individual to be ethical while using AI?
So I don't think it's possible for AI to be ethical because we've not yet seen a utopian ethical human society. So we'll build those flaws into AI. We can't expect to build perfection if we are not perfect. So those flaws will carry on.
But don't we know what perfection looks like as opposed to what it is in our realm? So we know that utopia exists because there are certain qualities that it possesses. So as humans, we know that perfection has certain qualities that they're supposed to possess. So why can that not be embedded into AI?
Because my utopia is different from anyone else's utopia, and that's why we end up with biases. That's why your code looks clean, not bright. I was saying earlier about ChatGPT writing for you code. Fine. Maybe the code needs optimization. Maybe the code has inline biases. Just because the code runs does not mean the code is not flawed.
Okay. Yeah. Francis, do you agree with this thinking?
You know, we'll never agree with Michael. and a week is not enough for us. So don't start a fight. He has brought in a very interesting, a very important angle to the debate. Your utopia may not be his utopia. And maybe we should have started with the definitions. What is ethics? What's morality? What's the difference between morality and ethics? And then from there, how does that progress on? So you find morality is personal, it's individual, it's about principles of right and wrong. It's in your head. Ethics is when we share these principles and we codify them. So we say we have, usually you'll hear there's a code of ethics, right? You've heard code of ethics. That code of ethics is a very intentional way of representing ethics because ethics is shared. It's never individual. You cannot say, I feel very strongly and passionately about this. This is unethical. No, that's morality. It's in your head. Ethics is codified and we have agreed on it. So, and then after that, when we have ethics and we have a code of conduct, and people are, going against that code of conduct, and they are annoying us, what do? We make a law. So we make it illegal. So that now there are consequences for that. So think of morality as conscience, ethics as code of conduct, law as consequences. Okay, so that's a progression. Now, how do we bring in ethics into AI? Because that's what we're discussing. And as Michelle has said, as Michael has said, and this is a mistake we make, Carol. We want AI to be better than humans. Yet, by definition, AI should be, should just produce exactly the same results a human would produce in the same circumstances. So AI was never meant to supersede humans, by the way. Superseding humans, that is now the super intelligence that Michael was talking about. It was meant to produce what we produce. And the problem with this is then we end up with conundrums like bias. I honestly don't think, and I know this is a very contentious issue, and I welcome all your questions, and those who want to throw things at me, that's fine. But I don't think bias, I don't think bias is an ethical issue. I don't think it's an AI problem, because you bring in the data, and the data shows that, for example, there are three main examples that are given. Health, law, and jobs, right? So Amazon wanted to, automate the interview process, and they realized that the algorithm was selecting against women, so it preferred picking men. But that's because that is the data. That's what the data shows. That's how the human beings who are doing it, that's how they were doing it. So when you say, no, this AI is wrong because it is biased against women, it's not the AI that's wrong. That is what has been happening. And in fact, if you actually think about it, because in all these cases, there's also the case, obviously, of the health issue, and then there's the one where an AI algorithm was bypassing black people who should get linear sentences and preferring white people. There's the one for medical, the same thing. If you think about it, if you actually sit back and think about it, so those programs were scrapped off. Why? Because, oh, this is unethical. Now, what did we go back to? We went back to the human systems which were flawed and which had produced the biased data in the first place. In my opinion, I think in all those cases, we should have gone on with these AI innovations because they helped us to see that there is bias. Before, we didn't know there was bias. But when we implemented them, now we could see the bias. With AI, we can control for that bias. With the human beings that we went back to, we can't control. So those people now are back to the problems they have always had. We could go on, but let me give other panelists an opportunity.
So
Yeah.
Alfred, you're quite a huge advocate of OpenAI, ChatGPT. So in what ways do you think that we can actually use ChatGPT locally, pragmatically, and ethically?
So I'd say looking at it from the entire AI value chain, from the time where you define the problem that the AI is going to solve to the time where you're actually building the AI model itself, and then to the stage where the AI solution is actually being used by an end user, and then finally what outcomes come out of it. So in terms of ethics, I would say I always encourage peer review in terms of if you have worked on this model, invite other industry players to come in and inspect that model and look at it from the dimensions of how explainable it is. So can the model explain how it reached that particular decision? Because we have so many AI models that are black boxes, but initially we've been having research advancements that are encouraging people to use a framework to describe how the particular AI reached that decision. On the other side, there's something called red teaming, which might be very popular in the cybersecurity space, but is also actually being adopted in the AI space, where you contract different experts who are external from your industry, but they understand the particular model you've built, and they're basically looking for vulnerabilities and flaws in terms of what is this model particularly getting wrong, and that will actually help us to identify the flaws in this technology. I see a future where it will become fashionable that we will start preferring solutions and systems that are built by humans as opposed to solutions and systems that are generated by machines. So if it is a painting, if it's a photograph, if it is code, if it is even a writing of a thesis and so on. So we might get to a point where the industry will start self-regulating, where if a journalist is writing an article, you need to confirm to us that the entire of this article, you wrote it by yourself, as opposed to half of the article or half of the post being relied on by machines. So we really need to encourage probing and openness of use of this technology, and encouraging the vendors who are giving it to us to explain to us how is it reaching this particular decision. What are the instances where it will break? What are some of the really bad, outcomes that it might generate that they have seen? And that way we'll be able to encourage good ethical use of it.
Okay. So we will take questions now. Michael, you had a question on driverless cars, put a pin on that. If there's anybody else who has a question, you can take 2 and then we can answer those.
As leaders in technology, would you sack somebody for using AI-generated code and calling it their own?
I think I'll go first. Yes, I think I would sack somebody for writing code using AI and calling it their own. It means you're not qualified to do that job. It means you can't extend. Can you really extend the piece of code that has been generated by the AI? Can you explain the outcomes? Can you really scale whatever you've written? If you can do that, then it's good. But if you can't explain, if you can't defend it, then you are losing a job automatically. Yeah.
Well, I employed you to write code. You wrote code. Why would I fire you? Yeah.
Well, I suppose that brings us back to the code of ethics. So his and your ethical stances are both very different.
So if he owns a company, he will have a code of ethics that says you
must write your own code.
Yes, you must write your own code. In my company, I'll have a code of ethics that says whatever resource you can use to do the job, just do it. And as long as it's not, you're not stealing the code. Yeah, as long as you're not stealing the code, you have used ChatGPT, you have used whatever. I look at those as tools. So you have used that, you've come up with good code, better code, you've given it to me. In fact, you've given it to me in 1 day instead of 1 week. I'll promote you.
I think at the end of the day, really, when you use an AI to write a code and you say it's your own, maybe at the end you've just only revalidated that the code works. And it depends, like you said, the organization, what it is that you want to achieve. Do you just want to get to the end, or are you really worried about how people write the code? So it's a question of preferences. Either I fire you, I don't fire you. It's not really that relevant. It's what is the objective at the end that the organization has set for itself. So then you make that decision. But just one quick thing, just going back to the issue of ethics, I really do believe that the idea of AI is to do things that you cannot see in plain sight. Do you understand data? When you really understand granularized micro data, and I'm not talking about just data someone collects, understanding granularized micro data means you're talking about deep learning, and that data now starts beginning to self-attribute new characters to itself and start rewriting its own code. Basic machine learning will tell you this is what's just happened. But if you really want to talk about the ethics of an AI that is smarter than you, and it was built to be smarter than you from day one. If it's not smarter than you, then it's not doing what it's supposed to do. Then you're just analyzing information. You're creating analytics, you're running reports, you're doing business intelligence. Deep learning basically means that this thing can see things that I cannot see, and it can process it in micromilliseconds in ways it runs multiple sequences for you that you can't even imagine. Then you have to ask yourself, okay, what is ethical about that or not? But we can continue the conversation later.
If I could just add on to that, you're not losing your job because now you're creating a new opportunity. So you've got your code in a day or in minutes. The next part is fine, the code is there. Let's break the code. Let's optimize that code. So now instead of having 30 developers who you're constantly firing for using ChatGPT, I'll have 4 developers who are constantly on ChatGPT, copy, paste, or they're on AutoML, copy, paste. Then the rest of the day is spent optimizing that code, trying to break that code. And finally, our end product is better than the team that keeps firing people. Sorry. And then churns out a product in 10 months. I'll churn out a product that's quite stable in 2 months. It's a tool, use it. You don't need to, no one is actually, it's not a shortcut, it's just a tool. It should be treated as such.
So can we use AI and then think, okay, so who's accountable if there is something that goes wrong with the AI? Is it the person who wrote the code? Is it the person who uses the code? Is it the person who finds a bug in the code? Who is accountable for the code that has been written by AI?
Who's accountable for the use of a hammer to bludgeon someone's head? Wasn't the guy who invented the hammer?
Yes.
It's you using the tool. You've misused the tool, you should be held accountable.
I think, sorry.
Yeah, so maybe, Ben, I just wanted more clarification on the question because there's two contexts to it. So there's a software developer using the system to write code, and then there's someone who is not meant to be a software developer. Let's say it's a journalist or it's a musician that's writing code. So what was the context for that question? Yeah, because I think we are mixing it. So personally for me, if it's in the context of someone who is not a specialist that is using the system to write a code and they're giving me the output of it, I'd ask more questions in terms of, do you really understand? Can you take it further to the next step? If you can't, then you're out of the job. But if it's a software developer who is doing it to just help them optimize their work, then there's nothing wrong with that. However, we are edging closer to a time where we're in a lazy generation, right? We use software to do everything for us, to order food, to do work and everything. So the people who excel at the end of the day in terms of software are the ones who can really explain deeply what the software is doing. And we won't excel if we keep encouraging a generation of outcomes that, you just use the system, get the outcome and get the job done. I think eventually the whole system will break and it will show that we are quickly just trying to do work because we have a tool in front of us.
Yes, so thank you. So I wanted to go back to the question that you asked. And I actually agree with Michael.
Really? Shocker.
Yes, shocker. I can't believe it. So if the one who invented the knife is not responsible for how the knife is used, okay? So to that extent, I agree with Mike. Beyond that, I don't. So different organizations, if you go like, for example, the Department of Defense in the US, they have an AI ethics like code of conduct, and they make it very clear that the people who come up with a code, they are responsible. There's a lady who was talking about the models. When you're training the models and you have data, the data you're using to train the model, that is within your responsibility as the developer, okay? And then once it is implemented or deployed into production, then you have to make sure that it is secure. That's the other issue about AI ethics. You must make sure it's secure, safe, all those non-functionality issues. However, once it's deployed, then that's what now Mike was saying, whoever uses it is responsible for using it properly. But I do think that the developer has a much bigger role in AI ethics in guaranteeing that, one, the models are trained properly. We have modules for data augmentation. If you don't have enough data on black people, you can augment it, and that can be solved now. The developer is also, of course, responsible during the deployment to make sure they advise the company on how to secure it. And also, the third thing is the developer is also responsible to make sure that the way it's designed, it cannot be misused. It is, the scope is very clear and for the application, and they have foreseen how it can be misused and blocked those avenues. I think the developer in that case, Michael, I think we can agree on that one at least.
Yes, we can.
Yeah.
It's a
good day. It's a new year.
It's a new year.
Yes, but now when it comes to use, then obviously if the user chooses to misuse, and we've seen this, law enforcement especially in the US, that's a big deal. If they choose to misuse it, then you cannot hold the developer responsible for that.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you so much. That was an elegant conversation. I can see Kevin is telling me the time is up. So people, please appreciate my panel.